Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. It is April 8th, 2025. It's a early Wednesday afternoon here, and I want to talk about the narrowly averted cataclysm that we nearly experienced with Donald Trump's unhinged threats towards Iran. This guy, there's never a dull moment with the Trump administration, that's for sure. But in any case, I was talking with my good friend Regis Tremblay last night, and he was understandably very concerned. We've been concerned about the possibility of nuclear war for a long time, and in fact, there was increasing talk of there's not going to be any more Persian civilization, according to Trump. How do you do that? Well, nuclear weapons are a tested method of getting rid of an entire country. So things were looking quite iffy. But it was, for me, it was kind of hard to believe that Trump would actually do that. So we woke up this morning and it says, we say that the world is still with us. There was a question of whether the world was going to be with us. If you've ever seen these scenarios of nuclear war, there's one nuclear weapon goes off, and then it takes about 30 minutes to get from Washington D.C. or someplace in Kansas or Oklahoma to Moscow, with an intercontinental ballistic missile, or maybe 15 minutes if it's in a nuclear submarine off the coast of Russia, or a nuclear submarine off the coast of Washington. And before you know it, the world is basically burned to a crisp within about 2 hours. So fortunately, that did not happen. But some interesting things did happen. First of all, there was tremendous pressure on President Trump not to follow through with his threat. Apparently, first of all, there was a meeting of the UN Security Council that was apparently called by Bahrain, which is one of the Gulf puppet monarchies, puppet of the West. And they put forth a resolution basically condemning Iran for the audacity of its attacking Bahrain after Bahrain was allowing the U.S. to use its military bases to attack Iran. And Bahrain is saying, we just have hotels and beaches here. We have nothing to do with this thing. Why are you getting so angry at us for? Well, because you're an accessory to a mass murder. That's why. But these people are just so clueless. Fortunately, Russia and China, for the first time, stood up and said, this is ridiculous. It's unacceptable. What this UN resolution condemning Iran and demanding that the gate of the Strait of Hormuz open up again. The Strait of Hormuz was open until the Western imperialists, started bombing the crap out of Iran. So what is Iran supposed to do? Oh, yes, please abuse me. Oh, I like it. What does the West expect of the people that it attacks? So anyway, so fortunately the UN, rejected that resolution, even though it in numbers it won 11-4 and 2 against, but the two are two veto members of the Security Council, Russia and China. They said, no way, we're not going to allow that. So that was good. The other thing is that Trump did agree to accept the Iran's conditions theoretically, and which was quite amazing to me, because Trump didn't insist on Iran acceding to Trump's conditions, because those are a complete non-starter. However, it's not clear to me why Trump actually did decide to go ahead with the agreeing to the ceasefire based on, only a 2-week ceasefire based on Iran's 10 terms, which are far more realistic than Trump's terms. So we'll have to see what happens. So this is basically a reprieve. But the other really good thing is that there's been so much outrage over Trump's psychotic behavior, for lack of a better term, that I saw Ro Khanna and there were another two congressional representatives who gave very good speeches saying that one of them is Iranian, actually, an Iranian opponent of the Iran regime. And she's saying, it's one thing for me to oppose the government in Ukraine, in Iran. It's quite another thing for my country to be wiped off the map in a nuclear blast. So she was quite upset about that, understandably. And so they're talking about, impeachment of President Trump, or possibly of taking him out on a 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution basically says that if the U.S. president becomes incapacitated in one way or another, that there's a procedure by which he can be removed from office and replaced by the vice president, which isn't much better because the vice president is just as much of an ideologue as President Trump is. But the good thing that I see about this is that there's enough disarray in the Western camp about following through on Armageddon that at least it gives us 2 more weeks to, we could pack our bags before we head to Mars. So it gives us a little more time to pack, or to dig a hole in our backyard where we can, have a little bomb shelter there until the radiation kills us instead of the blast. So what else we want to talk about? So last night, Regis and I were talking about this whole situation, and what do we do about it? And it's certainly depressing. But what I was saying is that we have to consider our own agency, which means that regardless of the conditions that we're in, even though things may look really bleak and there's no hope and those sorts of things, we can't allow that to demobilize ourselves. So my suggestion to everybody listening to this, to my podcast here, is to call, write, email, do whatever you can to your 2 senators and your representative and say, get rid of this guy. I got an email from Dennis Kucinich, who's one of the foremost, former representatives, congressional representatives, and former candidate for the U.S. presidency. I worked for him. Actually, he's a peace candidate. He's a man of the people, and he was saying that we really need to, get rid of this president. So I sent this to I forwarded this Kucinich's message to my sister, and she said, "Impeachment, we need to fire him," which I think would be just. It's like that. This is what I was talking about with Regis, with malignant narcissists. You don't pander to them and you don't butter them up. You just say, "You're a blankety blank, blankety blank." An FA, and we're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore. That's what we need to do. So that was that, and so we really need to lean on whatever granted our democracy is largely delusional, but in rare cases it may be that if there's a huge upswell of sentiment by the people. And this includes there should be mass demonstrations actually, immediately in Washington and all over the country in order to, express these feelings, because this is basically, I think this kind of thing has happened in the past. Nixon was gotten rid of on the basis of Watergate, and it was in 1970 actually. I went to a demonstration in Washington D.C. when Nixon bombed Cambodia completely unprovoked, and we students were as mad as hell. We weren't going to take it anymore, so we shut our campuses. We literally shut the campuses down, forced the administration to essentially call off the academic semester so that we could go out and stop the war. And there were 1 million people who went to Washington D.C. I was one of them. And And it turns out that President Nixon was in the White House and he was genuinely scared. If you get enough people there, you can actually scare these people. They may be psychotic, but they're not completely, what can I say? They're not completely immune to primal fear of the people if there's enough feedback for them. So that's the point, that these people really need a strong dose of reality therapy. No, your delusional Armageddon scenarios are really not going to work, and please shut up and go away. As I like to say, power concedes nothing without a demand, which is what Frederick Douglass said. He was a guy who was born as a slave. Somehow he managed to get his freedom, and he became, because he's a highly intelligent person, he educated himself. He got educated, and he became a major spokesperson for what I would call the real America, not the America that's not the billionaires' America, but the America of the people, the United States as it was meant to be. So there's that. But in closing, I won't dwell on this so much, but in closing, we do have to understand the fact that the people who are running the country right now, that are in power, whether it's Trump or J.D. Vance, if Trump is replaced, these people, they have an agenda, which is world hegemony. They started, massacring the Native Americans. They had a plan to wipe out Russia in World War II. They had a plan to wipe out Iran, is the latest iteration of what Trump's threats. And they've been stopped in their tracks for the time being. But that doesn't mean that they're going away, and it doesn't mean that they're changing their attitude. So we need to stay on top of this. And, my friend Regis was saying of Brian Berletic, who I'll attach his video with Rachel Blevins underneath this video on Substack, that you'd think that people would understand this problem that we have in our country, but they don't. And Brian Berletic harps on this again and again, that the United States government is really, really out of control, and we have to stay on top of this situation and work to get a real change of attitude towards the ruling classes of the United States, towards the rest of the world, and towards us as the people of the world. So I'll leave it at that. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to like and share my videos, and share the content that I have, including the video by Brian Berletic and Rachel Blevins, which is excellent. Brian has been a staunch witness of U.S. imperialism for a long time, and he really needs to be supported. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.